Welcome to episode 8 of the CompTIA CySA Plus training series. Today's episode begins domain 3 of all of the 4 domains. And in domain 3, we're going to be talking about incident response management. And in episode 8, we're going to begin with incident response frameworks. My name is Hackaholics, your trainer for today. And to get more videos like this one, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. All right, domain 3 is incident response and management, and this weighs in at 24% of the final exam, the CS0-004 0004 exam, and it focuses on the entire incident response life cycle. In episode 8, we're going to begin with looking at a variety of incident response frameworks. Now, thankfully, I have actually done individual videos on each one of these frameworks already. So if you want to get more in-depth information about them, all of that stuff is available for you already on this channel. But today we're just going to be taking a glimpse at each one of them. We're going to look at the steps, and we're going to look at some case studies into which they apply and how they will set the stage for the rest of this domain's content. Domain 3 is the heart of what makes CySA truly valuable, or the CySA analyst, we should say, knowing how to handle an incident from the first alert to full recovery. Now, I will tell you that if you're just starting out in cybersecurity, it's very unlikely that you're going to get a job as an incident responder. Incident responders have to be quick on their toes, and they have to be cool and calm in the pressure and the heat of a major incident, because it can be pretty stressful. And if you don't respond accordingly, the damage can be pretty big. And for that very reason, companies typically don't put brand new green rookies in a role like this. So if anything, you will start as a junior analyst, and you'll go up to the SOC analyst, and you'll be doing alert triage. And if anything, you might be able to kind of send them to the incident response team. But you're not going to be handling the incident from the first alert to full recovery. That's probably not what's going to happen to you when you're just first starting out in cybersecurity. So the key things that we're going to be talking about in comparison to 03, the 03 version of the examination, the 04 version puts some more refinement and a little bit more emphasis on certain frameworks. So the streamlined frameworks, this would be the cyber kill chain from Lockheed Martin, the diamond model, the MITRE attack matrix, but there's more emphasis on the practical mapping of things. So how these things actually connect to real life scenarios. That's basically kind of like the big connection of the stuff that used to exist on 03, but we're now approaching it in a new light for 04. There's going to be a separate emphasis on detection versus analysis. This is new in 04. There's going to be an added focus on triage and timeline creation as distinct activities, and more scenario-based questions on mapping indicators to frameworks. So that's the gist of it. Chapter 8 is going to be focusing on the detection and analysis portion of things. So this is where most of the real-world incidents are actually won or lost, whether or not you detect them and analyze them in time and appropriately. Spotting the attack early, understanding what's actually happening before containment, which is the kind of the next step. After you analyze or detect something and you deem it to be malicious, the very first step is to contain it so that it doesn't spread. So before you even get to detainment or containment, excuse me, I'm kind of like mumbling over my words today. The detection mechanism is very important. The analysis mechanism is very important. So by the end of this episode, we're going to be able to recognize attack patterns using these modern frameworks, triage them effectively, and build accurate timelines that will help the leadership understand the scope of things. And so we're going to be diving deep into it, and we're going to, for the most part, just use the content and the lecture environment. But you can always go into a sim if you want to kind of do more practical exercises. You should already know by now that TryHackMe will get you a free membership with just a username and password, and you'll get access to the rooms that have the Splunk sim inside of them. So all of those things are readily available to you. We don't have any specific labs for them because each one of those rooms inside of TryHackMe is an individual lab. So I would just highly recommend you actually check them out. At the end of this video, I'll kind of give you a quick little search help just so you know how to find them. But for the most part, you would be doing those as an independent study for yourself. We're just going to be reviewing the various kill chains, the various frameworks, and how they apply. To get access to the CYSA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, Pentest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. Okay, let's do a detailed domain overview, kind of like an introduction detailed overview of the domain. So incident response is the structured process of handling security incidents to limit damage, recover operations, and prevent recurrence. So all of these things are very important. This is not a one is better than another one. We should focus on one area more than another one. That is not at all the case. It needs to be a structured process, meaning there needs to be a set of checklists or steps that have to be taken every single time. And then the whole purpose of that structure is to limit damage, prevent damage from kind of going out of control and hurting the entire network, recover the operations if they've actually impacted the operations to the point that you no longer can operate as a business and you need to get back to business as usual, and prevent recurrence. And this is part of the lessons learned process, the debrief that happens after the incident is over, so that we can discover how they got in, what they did, how can we prevent them from getting in again, how can we secure the vulnerabilities that they were able to take advantage of. All of those conversations happen in the prevent recurrence. We call this the lessons learned and the tabletop exercise, but more, it's kind of like a meeting with everybody that was involved, and it also includes upper management. It might include the C-suite executives that would be involved because they need to be in the loop of everything that's going on. So this is a big step as well, and it's a cycle. So the incident response cycle is not something that happens once and then we just wait for another incident to take place before we do this again. We ideally, in a good environment, they would be running tabletop exercises regularly. They'll be running simulated attacks against their own systems regularly, just to see how the defensive team will react. So the security team, the security management, I should say, they'll schedule an attack against their own team, and they won't tell the defensive team that the attack is taking place. And then the job of the defensive team will be to make sure that they respond accordingly and do everything accordingly. And then after it's over, they'll have the debrief and the lessons learned, where they're like, okay, this is where we did great, this is where we messed up, etc. So all of that just to prepare the team and keep them sharp and keep them on their toes. In the 0-4 examination, the domain, the incident response domain, emphasizes practical application of frameworks to real incidents, separating detection, which means spotting that something is wrong, from analysis, which means understanding what is wrong, how it's happening, and why is it happening. Then there's the triage process, which is the prioritization of the alerts that come in, and the creation of a timeline, which is actually really, really important. You know, at 8 o'clock, this happened. At 8:15, this happened. At 8:23, this happened, etc., and etc., until the whole thing is over and you are now in the lessons learned phase. Preparation for performance-based questions involving log analysis, framework mapping, and triage decisions. And a lot of these things will require that you actually pay attention to the log items. Like, it's a very, very... It's not fun to do, but it's really, really important to do, because in SIM environments, when you're doing security analysis, right, you're inside of a security operations center, you're going to use a SIM. There's not going to be a very detailed overview of each individual log item. And even in those cases, you should be able to, okay, let me open this specific event item and then look at the details of it inside of the SIM. So you still need to look at all of the details inside of the SIM. There's also the version of this that they actually send you the log, and now you're just looking at individual log items without them being correlated to other events that may have taken place during that incident. And so being able to read the log items individually without a SIM helping you correlate them together, and then being able to paint a picture of what happened, that's going to be a really important skill set in this specific topic. The first framework that we're going to look at is the Cyber Kill Chain Framework by Lockheed Martin. Now, this is the actual 7-stage process. I do have an entire video that's dedicated to this, so I do encourage you to check this out. The CS0-004 examination takes 3 core frameworks, but it streamlines coverage to focus on the usability of them. So the Cyber Kill Chain is the first core framework, and this is the one where most conversations around incident response will actually connect back to. They will try to look at what stage of this series of steps the current attack is in, or the current incident is in. At what stage did we notice what's going on? So obviously the goal would be to notice from reconnaissance, because they haven't weaponized the information that they got about us. They haven't delivered a payload. We have not been exploited. There hasn't been some kind of ransomware or some kind of executable installed on our systems. There is no a remote command and control server that's controlling everything, and they have not been able to exfiltrate data. They haven't been able to encrypt all of our files and hold us at ransom, all of those things. So the earlier in this process you detect the attack that's taking place, the better it is. And that's the goal, is to be able to detect it in reconnaissance and make sure that we can just go ahead and stop them in their tracks before they can even do anything. Now, when you review, we actually did this when we were using the MITRE attack matrix, and we were looking at a couple of advanced persistent threats. So when you go look at the advanced persistent threats on MITRE attack, you pull up the groups portion, and all of this I'll share with you again, but there's an entire video, there's multiple videos really dedicated to this on this channel. But even inside of the CYSA course that you're in, there's also a video that we did earlier on where we went and looked at MITRE attack, and then we pulled up the different groups. And some groups can skip reconnaissance and they can go directly into weaponization and delivery, because they either got specialized information from somebody that works on the inside, or they were able to use open source intelligence to actually analyze what your infrastructure might be like, and then from there they were able to weaponize that data. So there are possibilities that you don't necessarily start from reconnaissance when you're actually doing the attack, and you could be starting from weaponization or delivery. From the perspective of the hacker, that's exactly where you want to be, right? That's a good thing, because you're already further along the kill chain than starting from the beginning, getting noticed from the beginning, and then getting kicked out and blocked off and reported, all those things. So from the perspective of the attacker, you want to start out as late as possible inside of these series of steps. From the perspective of the defender, you want to catch them as early as possible in these series of steps. So if they come in to the game with weaponized data, then fine, that's the earliest you can catch them. You should be able to catch them right there. If they come in trying to deliver the payload and you catch something being transferred into some of your networks or some of your computers, that's perfectly fine, as long as you catch them, and that's actually the first step that they've taken inside of their attack against you. But the whole goal here is to catch them as early as possible, so that the attack doesn't get fully to the phase where they're actually taking actions on their objectives. Command and control and actions on their objectives is the very end of it, and it's where ideally where we would, for them, right, on their end, for the attacker, for them to be able to take actions on their objectives is a gold mine of data that could, again, they could encrypt our systems, right? They can encrypt our systems and they can ask for ransom. And if we don't have backups, we are absolutely screwed. So there's a lot of things that can be done from our perspective to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's very rare that they'll come in immediately and take actions on their objectives. So it's very rare, almost impossible for them to start here. So that's lucky for us. But it can be very possible that they'll start at delivery and they already have all the data that they need. They've weaponized all their data. They've created all their payloads. They're now delivering their payloads and they're working on exploiting us. That is very possible, and that can happen more often than we think it might. So it's very important for us to be on our toes and to be aware of all of these things. So the purpose of the cyber kill chain, or the best use case of the cyber kill chain, is for understanding the attacker progression and identifying where our defenses can break the chain. So where in this series of steps can we come in and break the chain that the attacker is using to attack us? And if you want more information on this, again, I highly encourage you to go into the channel homepage, our channel homepage, and just search for cyber kill chain, and you'll be able to find the videos that are relevant to this specific topic. Our next framework is going to be the diamond model of intrusion analysis. And so there are 4 core features on this one. And this one is used for mapping the relationships in an incident, the who, the how, the what, and the where. So the adversary would be our who, right? Who is attacking us, and who's the actual operator that's attacking us, and then who is the beneficiary, who is the person that might be hiring that operator that could stand to benefit from our systems getting attacked. The infrastructure is how. So what are they actually attacking? Or what specific elements, or how are they attacking us? I should say it like that. How are they attacking us? What is their methods of attack against us? The capability is the what of what they're attacking, and then the victim would be the where of what they're attacking. Now, to get a little bit more detail for you, I pulled up Gemini, and I dropped it in here just so we can get some more information. And what's really nice about this kind of put a smile on my face. At the very end of it, it gave the diamond model reference to a link, and it actually is that link that's on my channel. So this is my video that is now being referenced from Gemini, and this put a giant smile on my face, let me tell you. So this is actually a very, very cool thing that we were able to see. So it's giving you the full summary, basically. It gives you the summary of the video in bullet points and everything like that, and then actually has the link to the video itself. And again, this is just super, I'm like nerding out over the fact that my video is being referenced inside of a search for Gemini. I'm so baffled by this right now. It's actually really, really cool. Okay, so let's go here then, and let's look at the very, very top, right? So the 4 core features, the vertices of this. So we have the adversary, the who, so the adversary operator, the actual person behind the keyboard executing the commands, the adversary customer, the entity that stands to benefit from the attack. It could be a nation state, depending on who they're attacking, or it could just be a competing company. The capability would be the how behind it. So this refers to the tools, the techniques, the procedures, the TTPs that are used. It includes malware, exploit kits, social engineering, any of those things. The capacity inside of the capability is the set of vulnerabilities that the adversary can exploit with their current tools. The infrastructure is the where of where they're attacking. So this includes physical or logical communication paths. Type 1 infrastructure would be owned or fully controlled by the adversary, so their own command and control server. Type 2 would be infrastructure owned by a third party, but being used or compromised by the adversary. So it could be a compromised legitimate website that's used to host malware. It could be a botnet, for example, that the adversary has now purchased through the dark web, and the owner of the botnet would be considered the third party, and they've now been hired to attack us, and the adversary is hiring them to do it, right? The victim is the what, so this is the target of the attack, the victim persona, the people or organizations being targeted, the victim assets, the specific attack surface, IP addresses, host names, or specific software where the capability is actually being deployed. Then we have the 2 primary axes, so the social political axes, which goes back and forth between the adversary and the victim. So this describes the relationship and the motive. It asks us, why is this adversary targeting this specific victim? Is it for financial gain, espionage, or activism? And then there's the technical axis, the balance between, or the back and forth between the capability and the infrastructure. And this describes how the tools and the network work together. It focuses on the technology that enables the attack to function. And then there are the meta features. So these are things that we're going to be reviewing inside of logs, for example, and trying to determine from our SIM dashboards and things along those lines. So this is the context, right? So to make the whole thing actionable, we need to add meta features to the events that take place. And it lets us get the needed tracking to be able to actually track an attack over time, right? So timestamp, when did it happen? Phase, where does it fit in the life cycle, the cyber kill chain life cycle, right? The reconnaissance or delivery phases, for example. Was the attack actually successful, or are they still in the middle of it? The direction, was the traffic moving from the infrastructure to the victim or vice versa? So are they sending us malware, or are they extracting data from us? The methodology, general class of activity. Is it spear phishing that they use to get in? Are they using an executable that relies on Ubuntu Linux systems? Something, I don't know, something along those lines. And then the resources, what external elements were needed, specific hardware or stolen credentials. And in the practical application, this is just an example of it, where it could be used to do pivoting, where you actually pivot from one location to another one, because the points are connected. Knowing one piece of information allows you to pivot to find other piece of information. So you find a piece of malware, this would be the capability. You reverse engineer to find a hard-coded IP address. This is the infrastructure. You check your firewall logs to see who else in your company contacted that IP address. This would be trying to find the victims. And finally, you search that IP address to see if it's being used by a known group before, and that would be the adversary. And you can find that on VirusTotal. You could find it on MITRE attack, etc., etc. So when you link the multiple diamonds together over time, you create the activity thread, and this allows you to map out an attacker's entire campaign, showing how they moved from early reconnaissance to final data exfiltration. And this is often used along the MITRE attack framework to provide the full view of what's going on. And then we have the reference to our diamond model video that provides a clear walkthrough of the diamond model's components and explains how security operations use it to analyze threat actors. This is so cool. I love the fact that that's actually happening. But okay, so that's pretty much it. That's all we got for the diamond model. Our next framework would be the MITRE attack framework, and this is the modern gold standard. It provides tactics, techniques, sub-techniques, and procedures as the outlines, and it focuses on, or CS0-004 I should say, focuses on using the enterprise matrix, which is the most common, then mapping logs and indicators to techniques. So for example, the ID of phishing and the ID of command and control scripting, being able to map these IDs to the actual techniques that are being used, and then using the attack navigator for heat maps. So the tip for the exam is to expect practice-based questions, performance-based questions, asking you to map log snippets or alerts to attack techniques. So one of the easiest ways that I can do this for you is to actually show you this yet again. But again, there are multiple videos on this channel already that you can use to reference this specific resource and learn more about it. So if we just search for MITRE, it'll bring up the link for us, and it's at attack.mitre.org. This is the enterprise matrix that was being referred to. So we have the columns themselves, which are the tactics. So reconnaissance tactic. Underneath it, it has 11 techniques, for example, active scanning. And if we expand on this, we have sub-techniques, for example, scanning IP blocks, vulnerability scanning, etc. Now, if I go into this one right here, I'll be able to see some procedural examples. So these are the actual entities previously, Ember Bear or Team TNT, that actually used this specific procedure, this sub-technique in the procedure. The mitigations against it, the detection strategies, and references for it as well. And so if we go ahead and just say we're going to run with this specific thing, right? So if we go look at here, we see that it has its ID, and then 001 would be the ID of the sub-technique, right? But if we wanted to go to reconnaissance, it would actually be its own technique, which would be the TA CS0-043. This is the actual tactic. And under tactic, we have the 1519, or 1595, I should say, T1595, which was the active scanning. And then underneath this one, 001 was scanning IP blocks. So that's where we just came from. So if we go into any of these, right, we would be able to see a variety of different things that, and specifically what you're looking for are these procedural examples. Obviously, you want to see what softwares were used and things like that, but typically it doesn't exist in the active scanning element itself because there are so many different things that can be linked to it. So what we would do is we would click on the Ember Bear, for example, and it brings us the actual group. So this is now inside of the groups section. I mentioned earlier that we could look at groups and their specific tactics, techniques, and procedures. So the Ember Bear group is a Russian state-sponsored cyber espionage group. They have associated group names and descriptions, so it could be Bleeding Bear, it could be Cadet Blizzard, etc. The techniques that they have used are these, right? And so we can see the full list of the techniques that they've used in previous campaigns. And as you can see, the techniques are very, very long. Now, the software that they've used is also listed here. So if you're looking for specific software that might be used, or if you want to start with this software and try to see which groups have used them or what they can be used for, you can always search for the software itself. So for example, Whispergate, let's say. So if I go to the search up here and I just type Whispergate, like that, I'll be able to see the Whispergate software come at the top. So you can actually search by software and then try to narrow down what specific groups have used the software. I can always, of course, click on the group, the software name itself, and it'll bring up this whole thing for me and the various techniques that are associated with it being used and the groups that have used it. So for example, Ember Bear, right? So all of these things they all connect to each other. Now, the thing that I really want you to pay attention to is this thing right here. So the attack navigator is unbelievably useful, and it also shows up on the profile pages of the groups themselves. You'll also see this button, the attack navigator. And so if we click on this, we'll see the download version and the view version. So if I click on view, it'll open it inside my browser for me. And now this will actually show me the path for Ember Bear and what they've used to go along their actual attack. So, what tactics they used under, or what techniques they used under reconnaissance, scanning IP blocks, vulnerability scanning, and then how did they develop their resources, and we see that highlighted here. How did they gain initial access? We see that highlighted. How did they execute, and then what were their persistence techniques, and then what was their privilege escalation techniques, and then we go forward, what was their defense evasion techniques, what was their credential access techniques, what was their discovery techniques, lateral movement, collection, command and control, and finally exfiltration. So this is actually one of these groups that was able to achieve the action on their objectives and actually get to the very last stage and establish exfiltration to a cloud storage device. So this is gold right here. So if you find one thing, it can lead you to getting the rest of the data. So if you come in and you notice that, I don't know, PowerShell is being used in some funky way, and you're like, okay, I'm curious how PowerShell may have used it. You try to find an IP address, you find the IP address, and then you go to VirusTotal and you search up the IP address and you see that the IP address is attributed to the group Ember Bear, right? Or previously used by Ember Bear. Now you have a name that you can bring into MITRE and you can see, okay, what is the flow of techniques and tactics that this group would specifically use? So that would be using the group name itself. But if you wanted to, you can go to the software. So we'll go back to Whispergate. And then we'll do the same thing. Drop down, click on View for the attack navigator, and then we'll be able to see the Whispergate software usage and where it came in from. So now notice, interestingly enough, it does not show anything for reconnaissance, resource development, or initial access. It starts from the element of, or actually, is this under initial? No, this is under execution. So under execution, we now see these little highlights being taking place, and then it goes to persistence, privilege escalation, etc., and it finally gets to the very end, where now this is actually being used for data destruction, for disk content, structure wipes, as well as system shutdowns and reboots. So notice how the path for this software is very different from the path for the actual group that previously used it. The Ember Bear group had a different set of goals that they were trying to achieve. The software that we're looking at has its own set of goals that it can accomplish, and most likely what it's used for. So it's a very, very interesting resource. It's a very powerful resource to use MITRE ATT&CK. Click around, find things. You can even search by their name right here individually up here. You can click on this CTI button and try to find groups, software, or campaign lists. You can start in any location. And ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to end up in a place like this, where you actually get to see how the attack maps out, how it actually moves forward, and what the steps before of it may have been and what the steps after it would have been. And it is extremely useful. So one of the key things that we would say that you should be familiar with is, at the very least, that, hey, you know what, there is this many columns. I think it's 13 altogether. But there's the columns that act as the tactic names, and inside of them there are techniques, which is the list that we see right here. And if we expand any of these ones that can be expanded, we can see that there are sub-techniques inside of them. So if you see this type of an ID, right, it has the .001. If you see that kind of an ID, that's a sub-technique. If you see this kind of an ID, that's the technique. If you go through that kind of an ID where you see TA, 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 where you see the TAs, those are the tactics. So these are just little kind of code snippets where it's like, okay, if I see it starting with a TA, I know it's a tactic. If I see it starting with just a regular T and it actually has numbers after it and there's no .001, .002, that's the technique. And then if I see the .005 or whatever, I know that that's a sub-technique. And so these are the things, again, that can be extremely useful to you if you just understand the format of these things. So if we click on one of these softwares, we now see that the software ID starts with an S for software. That part's pretty simple, right? So we can go and then now we see which specific tactics and techniques it's actually associated with. So these are the ID types, and you can see how these things actually connect back to each other. And of course, the group IDs start with a G. So the tactic starts with a TA, the technique starts with a T, the sub-technique has a .00 something at the end of it, software starts with an S, and group starts with a G. Those should be fairly simple for you to wrap your head around, and that way you can actually be able to kind of break down questions a little bit easier and try to find the map to those questions, these performance-based questions, asking you to map the log snippet or the alert to an attack technique. These types of things should be easier if you just understand the general scope of that matrix. Which brings us to the real-world examples that we have here. So these are actually real-world examples that have taken place previously, and we get to see how they've been mapped to various steps and various IDs, etc., for the frameworks that we just talked about. So looking at the SolarWinds supply chain attack, this is a very, very popular attack. SolarWinds was the software that, and it still is the software that thousands of different organizations, including government organizations, they use it for security. So they use it for network monitoring, they use it for a variety of different things. The SolarWinds suite of software is multifunctional, so it can do a lot of things. And it's a very big name. So a lot of big organizations and government entities use it. Now what happens is one of their updates was previously poisoned, meaning that the source code in the update that they were going to distribute to all of their users, that update was poisoned. So every single user that updated their SolarWinds software by default injected that malicious code, that poisoned update code into their own system, which means that all of their clients, or I should say most of them, because some of them were able to catch it, but most of their clients got poisoned and their systems were compromised, and it became a whole ordeal. And it's like one of those big names when it comes down to historic attacks that have taken place and the historic hacks that were taking place. It kind of comes in the same breath and the same spirit as the Stuxnet attack, etc. So it's a very popular attack, and it's probably very likely that you may have already heard of this. So What happened, technically, it was a supply chain attack because SolarWinds has clients, and so they are in the supply chain of all of those clients. They supply a service to all of their end clients. And to be able to poison the update of SolarWinds, you are now poisoning the supply chain. So this is why it's called a supply chain attack. So when we're looking at the cyber kill chain, there's recon weaponization, which was the backdoor that was inside of the update, the delivery of it, which was the software update. Then there was exploitation, installation, C2, and action. So this is basically where they came in, right? So previously I mentioned that they don't have to do recon. Somebody can come in without doing any recon. This is exactly how it would be done, because the recon against the end client, against a government entity or a company that uses SolarWinds, they don't have to do recon against them. All they need to do is they need to go ahead and weaponize the actual update for SolarWinds, and as a result, they will be able to hack into every single client that uses SolarWinds. Then there's the MITRE attack ID that was attached to it. So the technique is T1195, which is the supply chain compromise. There's also the application layer protocol technique, because there was the application layer that was messed with. And there's also the remote services technique, because they were able to gain C2 control and gain remote connections. So there's actually 3 techniques that maps to this specific attack. And finally, the adversary themselves. So the adversary, or excuse me, the diamond model framework analysis. We have the adversary themselves, which is the APT29. So you can actually find that group in MITRE and see what they've done and what software they've used, etc. The infrastructure was the compromised SolarWinds server. The capability was the sunburst backdoor, which was used to actually establish the backdoor inside of the update. And the victim was government and Fortune 500 companies. So again, SolarWinds, I'm telling you, it's a very big name when it comes down to security and monitoring and things like that. And the government and Fortune 500 companies use them. So by executing and succeeding at this attack, this APT29 group was able to hack government and Fortune 500 companies. You have to understand the scope of that and how massive of an impact that actually is. The next one is the Colonial Pipeline ransomware. This was in 2021. So the Colonial Pipeline ransomware had a phishing delivery. This is where they came in. So they actually came in from the very beginning, and they were able to execute exploitation, installation, do all that stuff. And their final actions were to encrypt data and, of course, execute ransomware, to actually hold them at ransom and get money from them, from the Colonial Pipeline folks. And it all started from somebody clicking on a phishing link and opening a phishing email. So very, very simple entry point, but of course it worked. And then they were able to hold a large company at ransom. The attack references for this, the MITRE attack references, of course it starts with phishing, and we have the data encrypted for impact, and then we have C2 for command and control. So these were the techniques that were mapped to this specific attack campaign. And finally, we talked about this in the last video, I want to say in episode 7, which is the 0-day exploit that was actually it went nuts, because when we were looking at the EPSS score for this, the exploitability likelihood of that taking place, when it was originally marked, when the CVSS score came in, it was a high CVSS score, but the probability of it, and if you don't know what any of this means, you need to watch the last episode. The severity score was very high, but the probability score was very low. And what happened was, within a matter of days, the probability score went to 95%, which means that they were very active with it and they were running it and they were succeeding with it. And so this thing kind of caught like wildfire, which is why they're calling the exploitation wave, because as soon as it kind of peaked, all of a sudden it hit so many different companies. And the companies that were paying attention to the exploitability score, the probability score, were able to protect themselves, but the ones who were just paying attention to the severity score and weren't looking at the activity were not able to protect themselves, and they were taken. So the kill chain is the exploitation was a 0-day remote code execution. And so it came in from exploitation, right? It didn't come in from reconnaissance, right? Installation was web shells. Then they were able to establish command and control, and they were able to exfiltrate data. And so The attack technique IDs that are mapped to this would be the T1190 for exploiting public-facing applications, because that's exactly what they did, and then being able to launch server software components and then exfiltrate over a C2 channel. So you can see how these things get mapped, right? So it's very likely that you're not going to get a large list of items for your question. It's going to be that, okay, they're going to give you a handful of IDs, and then they're probably going to, because it's impossible to ask people to remember every single ID and what that ID connects to. So they will give you the ID, they'll give you the basic descriptor of that ID, and then your job will be to try to map the ID itself to the specific attack that's taking place. There are thousands of IDs that exist on the MITRE attack matrix, and to expect somebody to remember them is really, really unfair, and most people, like 99% of people, will not be able to remember them. So I was not required to remember them. I don't think you will be required to remember them either, but you do need to understand how things map and what something like this basically means, right? What does it mean for application layer protocol to be executed? Something like that. So studying the MITRE attack matrix would be of benefit to you, both for the examination as well as just for your own personal knowledge, to see what exists and what can be done and how these specific things actually connect to each other. Now we get to talk about incident response activities and the detection and analysis, which are now getting a separate emphasis inside of the 04 examination. They are clearly split inside of the 04 examination compared to the 03 exam. So detection is identifying that something is wrong. Analysis is understanding the actual incident that's taking place. So it's very, very important to just be really, really good at this, okay? The analysis part is also very important, but this part is the thing that sets everything off, right? So an alert from the SIM or the EDR, or making sure that the SIM and the EDR are properly configured to even set off alerts. That's a very, very important distinction to make, because the SIM or the EDR could say, oh, there's nothing wrong, and it's because they're misconfigured, and all the alerts that should be getting triggered are actually going under the radar. So this is very, very important concept right here. So the alert from the SIM or the EDR. Now the configuration of the SIM and the EDR is usually done by the security engineer, not the security analyst. So you don't necessarily have to worry about it, but it is something that I would also look into. There's an entire playlist called Security Engineering that exists on this channel, and I would include that in your studies if you're interested in being a cybersecurity professional. So the alert from the SIM and the EDR would set everything off, and then there would be reports generated by the users themselves, and then the anomalous behavior. So in impossible travel or high resource usage, these are also all signs that something is going on, right? So you look at the alert, and the alert itself could be that, hey, listen, this person logged in from China and their office is supposed to be in New York, and they logged in from China 30 minutes after they logged in from New York. It's like, okay, well, how is that possible? That's impossible for them to be able to travel from New York to China in 30 minutes. That just doesn't exist. So there's something wrong. Or a user reports that, hey, I think something is wrong. So these are all detections. And then, of course, there's the matching of the threat intelligence that would also take place. So all of these things can feed into the detection, and at the same time, they can emphasize each other's importance. You may be able to get an alert, you may be able to notice the anomalous behavior, and it matches threat intelligence. So all of these things can be standalone by themselves, or they can actually be a part of one alert that you've received, and it's all giving you all of the intel that you would need to say, I think there is something wrong, right? Something is going on. We need to pay attention to what's going on, and we need to escalate this immediately so that we can now analyze it. And so if you think that something is wrong, the very next step would be to confirm whether or not that thing is actually wrong. And you look at the scope of the affected systems or the affected users. Is it just one computer, one user, or is it a subnet that has 50 users inside of it and 50 computers inside of it? What is the scope of this specific attack? What is the root cause of this attack? Did somebody plug in something to their computer that they shouldn't have? Did they click on something? Did they visit a website? What happened that started this whole thing? What is the impact? What are we worried about? And hopefully you're not looking at data loss already. Hopefully you've detected it early enough that you're not seeing data being extracted or systems crashing. But the impact is what we're trying to prevent as well. So it's, maybe you've caught it early on, and based on what you saw in the MITRE attack, you're like, oh, you know what? I think they're trying to steal data. Or maybe they're just trying to move from one system to another one so that they can move from one network to another one and ultimately gain higher privileges to do some really bad damage. So whatever it is, you need to also be able to identify the impact that is supposed to be done or is actually being done, so you can really get an understanding of the end goal, the end game of these people that are attacking you, and exactly see what you need to prevent from taking place. And then there's the reconstruction of the timeline of the attacks, of the series of steps. At 8:15, they clicked on this link. At 8:25, the link downloaded this other thing. And then at 8:45, 5 systems were affected. Something like that, right? So it's the timeline of the activities starting from the root cause and then tracking what happened after that to see where things played out, at what time they played out, and if it all happened in a span of 15 minutes or if it happened across 5 days, right? That could actually be a thing as well, because the attackers may not have wanted to set off a lot of alerts, because when you have a lot of activity happening in a short period of time, it can set off alerts by itself. So maybe they didn't want to set off a lot of alerts. So all they did was, okay, we're just going to put some sleep timers on here. And, after an hour and a half, this is going to happen. After 3 hours, this is going to happen. And so that timeline is also very important so that you can understand what's going on. Because when they extend the timeline, they usually get past the security, and then they now get to actually take the action on their objectives and make lateral movement or steal data or encrypt something. So usually when it's being done fast, it sets off a lot of alerts. And when it's being done slow, it typically doesn't set off as many alerts, and you can evade the defenses. So that's why there's an entire category called defense evasion on the MITRE tactic list. So detection is often automated, analysis is human-driven and requires deep logs, and really, honestly, detection is technically automated because a SIM is doing it or an EDR is doing it. However, the configuration of those tools is done by a human being. So the configuration of the detection tool is done by a human being, and then analysis typically human-driven, and it requires deep logs and a deep search and things like that. And you can use an AI tool for it. For the most part, it is led by a human being, though. And after analysis comes triage and the creation of the actual timeline itself. So this is the process through which you can now prioritize something. Triage is something that is referred to a lot inside of the medical world. So when you're running an ER, one of the key things that you want is to triage every patient that comes in, and the people that are the closest to dying or the most emergent gets treated first. And that's what triage basically means. You're looking at everything that's coming in, and you're looking at the severity of what could potentially happen, and based on that, you will go ahead and prioritize everything. So the severity would be the score that you would get, and it would be the impact that it can have. So is it a crashing of all of our systems, or is it a crashing of a system, let's say? So is the impact that they want to crash the system, and then the scope would be how many systems do they want to crash? So do they want to crash 5,500 systems? That's pretty severe, right? So that's a very high priority kind of a item. What is the urgency of this? Is this actually happening? Is this going on right now? Or are they in the very first reconnaissance step and we don't need to worry about it immediately? Do we need to drop everything and pay attention to what's going on, or do we have some time, right? So urgency plays a big role in your triage attempts as well. The confidence of detection. So are we sure that this is a true positive, or is it most likely a false positive? Because more often than not, you're going to deal with false positives. So one of the key things that you're going to have to do through your detection mechanisms is to make sure you decrease the number of false positives so that your team only analyzes true positives. And that's, again, a part of the detection configurations that are done. So confidence in detection helps you determine how urgent something can be, right? And how severe something can be. And then what are the resources that are available to handle the triage? What are the resources that are available that are going to be attacked? What are the resources that are available to respond to everything, assuming that it is a true positive and we need to now take care of this? What do we have at our fingertips? What do we have at our disposal that we can go ahead and use these things so that we can take care of the problem? So there needs to be some kind of a system that would be used to answer all of these questions and to figure out the responses to every single one of these bullets. This cannot be opinion-based and it cannot be preference-based. There needs to be a scoring system that is used by every single person in the Security Operations Center, and everybody should be doing this in a uniform manner. So, for example, is this a high, medium, or low severity? Do we need to take care of this right now? Is it high on the triage list or is it low on the triage list? Or are you going to use a framework like MITRE Attack Navigator to prioritize something? There needs to be some kind of a system. That's basically the point here. Whatever the system is, there has to be a system. There can't be, okay, go figure it out. That can't be the thing. That's a very, very dangerous thing to say to somebody. There needs to be some kind of guideline that they're following to be able to figure it out. And then from triage, we go into the creation of the timeline. So reconstructing the sequence of the events that were taking place and using things like centralized logs with actual time synchronization taking place, correlating the events across sources, so endpoints, networks, and cloud environments, and using tools like the Elastic Timeline or the Splunk Timeline or the Microsoft Sentinel Investigation Graph to help you actually do this, because a lot of these tools can map these things out. They can correlate these events to each other, and they can help you figure these things out. So the network time protocol is a very, very accurate source of this. It's like a very universal kind of central timeline that you can use to go ahead and execute these kinds of goals on your mission. And it is one of those things that can help correlate a lot of these events very well for you. If the events are not correlated in time, if the timeline is not created in time, then what happens is what happened to the MGM, for example. So this was in 2025. It was just last year where the MGM Resorts, a massive company, was held at ransom. And I lived in Vegas while it was happening, and I was kind of shocked that it was happening because I was also in security, and I'm like, I can't believe that it's happening against such a massive company. And the main reason behind it was specifically, like, really the root cause. Obviously, they were hacked and all these things, but the security team did not reconstruct the timeline well enough. They delayed their timeline, or I should say that they didn't reconstruct the timeline well, and as a result of that, their containment of the ransomware was also not done properly, and therefore the attackers were able to move laterally for days before actually encrypting everything. And this is really, 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 really crazy. For somebody to be able to move laterally for days inside of your network gives them an immense amount of reconnaissance power. They can try to do a bunch of Bloodhound, like sending Bloodhound to try to find the users that have the highest privileges, so then they can go ahead and encrypt the highest resources, the highest value assets, and really hold you at ransom. And then now you're screwed. You have to pay the ransom. And especially if they're inside of your network in a situation where, okay, now we're going to write a script on here, and the script is going to destroy all of their backups, and then we're going to put them at ransom. That's evil genius kind of tactics that were taking place. And it happened against a very large company that has a lot of assets. So as you can imagine, the damages were very severe. So these things are happening as recently as 2026, I'm sure. This is not something that just happens once in a while. This is happening regularly, and it happens against massive entities that you would assume have really, really strong teams in security, when in actuality, the teams themselves are just abiding by the commands that are being given to them, the instructions that are being given to them. And if they're not spending too much time on the creation of the timeline and trying to figure out what's going on, and they're more worried about I don't know, XYZ that seems to be irrelevant, if they're not focused on the right things, that's mostly because their management is telling them what to focus on. So it would have to be blamed on upper management, trying to find like the root cause, kind of as we were talking about. It's like, okay, well, what was the root cause of this security defense tactic? What was the root cause of your security posture, and why did you guys not take care of it in time when you should have? So it happens to the best of them, and it happens as recently as 2025, and probably it's currently happening as I'm even recording this. So this is not something that is a one-stop or a one-time thing. It happens regularly, and it happens against the biggest and best of them. All right, so just going to do a couple of flowchart examples or flowcharts and examples for you. The first one would be the basic incident response triage flowchart. So it's very, very quick. So, the alert was received. Is it a true positive? Validate. If it is a true positive, if the answer to that is yes, then okay, we're going to assess the severity, the scope, and the impact. And then we're going to assign a priority to it. This is either a high, medium, or low. If it is a high priority, then we're going to escalate it immediately and form the incident response team and begin containment. And then if it's medium or low, then you're going to queue it for analysis and document and monitor and try to figure out what else is going on. Just because it's medium or low does not mean that it can't graduate to a high severity. So this is one of those things that, again, this is a very dynamic environment. It's a live environment. So just because it starts out a certain way does not mean it's going to stay there. It is very likely that in a matter of minutes, it can become a high priority event. So document and monitor that thing is very, very important, and it needs to be done by probably the best people on the team. So it needs to still have priority. It's not like it doesn't have priority. We need to be watching it very closely to see which way it's going to go and what they're going to do and what we should be doing as a response. We should be preparing as a response. A lot of times if you try to take something out of play, like a medium or low severity kind of thing, if you try to take it out of play prematurely, then you alert the hackers and they become skittish, and they become paranoid, and it's like threatening a lion or putting a lion in the corner of a cage and walking up to the lion and trying to scare the lion, and now the lion is bound to do some really, really bad things that it probably would not have done had you just watched it to see what it's trying to do. So just because there's a lion, it doesn't mean that the lion is going to destroy you and it's going to destroy everything. If you threaten the lion, then there's a very good chance that the lion is going to attack you. So these things are important to think about when you're looking at hackers. Just because the severity seems low, just because the overall impact or something like that seems low or seems medium level, it does not mean that it can't graduate to a high severity or a critical severity in a span of a couple of minutes. So just keep that piece in mind. All right, so now looking at the timeline example here, so simplified phishing and ransomware. So the phishing email was delivered at 8:15. So notice that it's all happening on July 10th, right? So the phishing email was delivered at 8:15. At 8:20, the user clicked the link inside of the phishing email, and by extension, there was a payload that was downloaded by clicking that link. At 8:25, PowerShell executed and it ran a command. And then what? That's 8:25 to 9 would be 35 minutes, and then 45 minutes. So 45 minutes later, lateral movement via remote desktop protocol took place. And at 11:30, ransomware encryption began. So for a while, they were moving laterally and they were trying to figure what assets that they should encrypt. And at 11:30, they started encrypting those assets. So this is a basic timeline, super, super basic. It's very likely that this timeline, in a real world example, the timeline is going to be much longer and it might even be more complex. It might involve more steps, etc. But it is the basic example of how you should be tracking this. The very, very root cause was the email was delivered and then the user clicked on it and the PowerShell executed, etc. And all of these things should have times associated with them. A lack of this kind of an activity is something that could lead to the MGM Grand Resort attack, where it's like they didn't have the timeline in place. They didn't look at what the root cause was. They didn't look at what these people have been doing for days when they're just moving laterally through our systems. They didn't pay attention to these kinds of things. And the next thing you know, after days of lateral movement, ransomware was actually executed. So it's very important. It's a very simple concept, but it's a very important concept, and it's a very detail-oriented concept. It requires an analytical eye. And now we get to episode 8, chapter 8's practice questions. There will be multiple choice questions. There will be some scenarios that we're going to share in here, and they are not going to be identical. I mentioned that at the beginning of every single set of questions. They're not going to be identical to what you're going to see in the exam, mainly because it is illegal for us to actually distribute the exam questions, and you will sign an NDA when you take the exam. So you're not allowed to distribute the actual questions, and the purpose and the spirit behind the questions that I'm going to share with you is to help you think, to learn how to think, to learn how to critically think and find the answers based on either process of elimination or paying attention to the actual details of the question and figuring out what would be the most obvious answer. So these are things that are all going to help you when you take any kind of an exam. Pay attention to the actual question to see what the question is actually asking you, and then from there, the responses themselves should kind of stand out. If you miss a specific detail of the question, which I've actually done, if you miss a specific detail of the question, then you'll think that you have the right answer and then you choose the wrong answer. So I've done that before, and it's not above anybody. I think anybody can actually do that. It's because a lot of times we get cocky and we think that we're doing really, really well, and all of a sudden we let our guards down. So keep your guards up. Make sure you pay attention to everything. Let's get into it. The first question is, which framework is best for mapping the relationships between adversary infrastructure capability and victim? So the cyber kill chain gave us the steps from reconnaissance all the way to attack on objectives. The MITRE attack framework is actually really great for doing all of these things, but if they're asking us this 4-step kind of mechanism here, that would be the diamond model. The NIST, this is technically a framework, but it's not what we're talking about for this concept. So this is kind of like one of those things meant to distract us. So it's definitely not cyber kill chain, and it's not MITRE attack. So the answer could only be the diamond model. In CS0-004, detection and analysis are treated as separate but overlapping phases. The same activity, only relevant in containment, optional for small incidents. Definitely not optional, so that's not true. Anytime that I see the word only, I automatically say that it's not true, because it's very rare, very, very rare that the answer will actually include the word only in it. So definitely not true. The same activity, no, because we know that they're actually separated. So they're separate, but they're overlapping phases. Which MITRE attack technique corresponds to phishing email delivery? Okay, so I mentioned early on that the attack techniques you don't need to memorize, and this question is throwing that theory completely out of the water. The only way I would be able to figure this out is to say that, that to go look at the list. Another way that I could try to guess this would be that, I know that phishing is earlier on in the process, and if phishing is earlier on in the process, then I would choose the ID that is the lowest in numerical value, which would be B, which is 1059. So just through, that's a guess. That's like a really, really risky guess without actually pulling up the list. So I'm going to say 1059, and it's 1566. So clearly, I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. So let's actually go look at MITRE, and let's see what they're talking about. Because phishing email delivery, that's so interesting that so I'm going to do show sub techniques just so I can expand everything on this page. And I'm going to do Control F, and I'm going to do phishing email. Nope, phishing. So let's look at the first one. Phishing for information. Spear phishing service is what we have on the left-hand side right here. And then phishing attached, spear phishing attachment link via service, voice. All of those things are here as well. Where's the rest of it? There needs to be more that's on here. So why there's so many, you guys, there's so many stuff that's on here. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so let's go to the very top. So the first one would be phishing for information, phishing service, so 1598. And is the answer 1598? It's 1566. Okay, so it's not any of these then. So we would go to next one, next one, next one, next one, next one, and this would be 1566. And this is for what exactly? Initial access delivery. So spear phishing attachment link via service. So what's the question asking here? It's saying corresponds to phishing email delivery. That's a very generic question. You're not going to get a question like that. That is too obscure of a question. You will not get a question like this. It's not to say that you shouldn't know what these things are, but you will not get a question like this. And I'm kind of shocked that this is even included in our list of questions. The cyber kill chain where the attacker establishes persistent access is the cyber kill chain stage, the cyber kill chain stage where the attacker establishes persistent access is. So it's not reconnaissance, because that's the very first one. It's not exploitation, and it's not actions on objectives. I think it would be through installation where they would establish persistent access. Actions on objectives is things like, it could actually be persistence, I want to say. I want to say, I'm going to say D, but my first thing was installation. I'm going to say D. Oh my God, it was installation. Gosh. Action on objectives is typically encrypting data or exfiltrating data, doing something like that. Establishing persistence would be more through installation. That was my first guess too. Gosh, oh my gosh. Triage is primarily concerned with detailed forensic analysis, prioritizing incidents based on severity and urgency. That stands out. Eradicating malware, no. Writing executive reports, no. So primarily, it's concerned with prioritizing incidents based on severity and urgency. In timeline creation, what is the most critical prerequisite for accurate event correlation? So the critical prerequisite for accurate event correlation: high resolution packet capture, real-time threat intel feeds, credentialed access to every system, accurate time synchronization across all sources. That's probably the most obvious answer. You don't need credentialed access to every system. Real-time threat intelligence feeds can be helpful, but they don't have anything to do with timeline creation for your incident response environment. High resolution packet capture also doesn't really need that much of a, we don't need high resolution stuff. We just need accurate times. So accurate time synchronization has to do with timeline creation. Which attack from recent years heavily used the T1190 technique for exploiting public-facing applications? And that was the one where it was MOVEit. It was the transfer 0 day, because the SolarWinds supply chain was a supply chain thing. They weren't using a public-face application. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware was through a phishing email, and the WannaCry worm was also something that was not done through a public-facing application. That's also a really cool thing to go ahead and study if you haven't heard of it before. So my response would be the B, MOVEit transfer 0 day. Yeah. The diamond model is particularly used for linear attack progression, understanding adversary-victim relationships, patch management, log ingestion. Definitely not log ingestion, definitely not patch management. And it's not a linear progression of the attack. It's the understanding of the adversary-victim relationships, which would be the diamond model. A high severity alert with active lateral movement should be triaged as high priority, immediate escalation. It's high severity, right? And they're doing active lateral movement. This should actually be high priority, immediate escalation. Deferred for the next shift is definitely not the answer. And it's not medium or low, because it's a high severity alert and they're actively moving laterally through the organization. So I would say high priority, yeah. Which framework stage would actions on objectives correspond to in a ransomware attack? So actions on objectives, which framework stage would that correspond to in a ransomware attack? So, data encryption. There we go. Okay, so reconnaissance is one of the stages. So that's not the answer. Exploitation is also one of the stages. Installation is also one of the stages. So the action on objective stage corresponds to this activity. So data encryption and ransomware node is an action. When mapping a phishing campaign to MITRE attack, the initial email is typically staged as, okay, this is what you would probably see. They're not going to just send you the IDs, right? You would probably see something like this. And so the initial email is typically tagged as phishing. It's not going to be commanding scripting. It's not going to be application layer protocol, data encrypted, none of that stuff. It's phishing. It's like a very obvious answer. In the SolarWinds attack, which was a supply chain attack, which framework would best illustrate the supply chain compromise entry point? The cyber kill chain, weaponization delivery, the diamond model adversary infrastructure, MITRE attack, T1195, all of the above. The question is asking best illustration of the supply chain compromise entry point, and I'm inclined to say A. D is very tricky because it's like, well, no, it can't be D because we're looking for the best illustration of the entry point of the supply chain compromise. And my answer would be A. MITRE attack T1195, I'm going to guess it has to do with supply chain attacks because I have not memorized them, so I'm not sure. But I don't think that's it either. So I'm going to say A. I am understanding that I might be wrong, but I'm going to say A. It's all of the above. Wow. How? What? My goodness. It's not. Okay. That's not okay. All right. This can't be a right answer. I'm just saying. And, I have heard other people say that the questions sometimes can actually have wrong answers, and they've submitted reports to say that this is the wrong answer and things like that. So I have heard that. And I think that does actually happen. In this particular case, that cannot be the answer. I can't imagine that would be the answer because they're saying which framework would best illustrate the supply chain compromise entry point. Like, it can't be all of the above. So, okay, let's go look at T1195 on MITRE attack. Let's see what specifically that is. So T1195, it doesn't even exist. Okay, that's insane. Oh, because it's not on the page like that. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. I was like, this doesn't, what? T1195, that's supply chain compromise technique. Okay, fine. For a second, I was like, bruh, what? No, okay, so it does exist, obviously, and is a sub-technique, or it has 3 sub-techniques: compromise software dependencies, supply chain. Fine. It does exist, fine. But I don't know, that can't be the answer. That's, all right. You know what? Whatever. Okay. I got it wrong. All right. I got 2 questions wrong. This is bad. I don't like getting questions wrong. Scenario, you receive an alert, user logged in from Germany at 3, then from California at 3:15. This is an impossible travel for sure. So it says, what is this likely an indicator of? Impossible travel. Which MITRE attack technique would you map it to? Would you triage this incident? I would contact the user, see whether or not they actually are traveling. Obviously they're not, because it can't be possible for them to log in from 3 o'clock and then 3:15. I would see if they're using some kind of a VPN or a remote connection somewhere. I would then go ahead and block off the user. I would go ahead and submit an analysis against their computer, see if their computer is connected against a subnetwork, see if we need to contain the subnetwork and disconnect it from the rest of the network. Yeah, it would be a good amount of activities that would be done, and this would be a high severity triage, in my opinion. I don't think we actually have an answer to this. No, we don't. So this is one of those things that I would just love to hear your feedback on this. So, this is most likely, I'm going to say the answer is definitely impossible travel. So that's definitely the indicator. Do a search and see which MITRE attack technique would that be mapped to, or which ones you think that would be mapped to. And then let me know how you would triage this incident. SIM alert shows PowerShell process spawning from a Word document. So that is essentially an attachable, or like an attachment, for example, that had macros inside of it. So inside of the macro of every single file, basically there's the path of where the file will be opening from, right? So the Word document, the Word logo, if you right click on it and if you look at its properties, there's going to be the path to the final executable. And the path to the final executable can be changed, and you can put the path of anything. You could put a command in there for anything. And so you could technically put a PowerShell command inside of the macros of a Word document. So it says map the behavior to MITRE attack techniques, at least 2 of them. So macro document, PowerShell process spawning can be, you can find it in a variety of different locations on MITRE attack. So we can go back to this again, and we can just show all of the sub techniques, and then we can search for PowerShell, and you'll see that there's going to be at least 3 different references. So we have PowerShell inside of execution, command and scripting interpreter, and then we also have event triggered execution, so PowerShell profile, that could be a thing, and then PowerShell profile also under event triggered execution. So I would say it's more likely an event triggered execution because they are opening a file. So when they open a file, a Word file, when they open the Word document, that's the event. The event is they open a document and now it's spawned PowerShell. So that would be the event, right? And then command execution would be the other one. Now, how this fits into the cyber kill chain, this is going into from reconnaissance. So if we go and pull up the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, if we pull this up, this is also a really fun way to look at it because you actually get to see the image and you get to see what's going on. So reconnaissance, harvesting email, weaponization, delivery, this would probably be it. It's like between weaponization and delivery is what's happening. The bundle via email, web, USB, something like that, exploiting vulnerability to execute code on the system. This could also be it. So I would say it's probably between delivery and exploitation somewhere, because they are now going to run the exploit, right? So that's what's happening. They've already delivered. So it's probably the Word document has already been delivered. The Word document has been opened, and now exploitation is taking place to execute code on the victim system. So that's exploitation is most likely the answer to that. And we have another one. You are building a timeline for a suspected ransomware incident. List 5 key log sources you would correlate. Describe 2 tools and features for timeline visualization. So Elastic and Splunk timeline, those would be the 2 tools. 5 key logs for a suspected ransomware incident. So we want to look at the network logs. We want to look at the sys logs. We want to look at the firewall logs. We want to look at application logs. And we want to look at, what else can we look at? Probably the individual logs from that individual computer. So let's say the endpoint logs from the originating point. So it would be the endpoint detection logs, there would be the network logs, the application logs, the firewall logs, and the sys logs. That would show us a good amount of data. Sys logs include security logs, so you can say security logs, authentication logs, something. There are so many different log sources that you could refer to that you can try to pull data from it so you can correlate the events that have taken place. The SIM tool can help you do that. And it could be Elastic, it could be Splunk. They both have the tools for visualizing the timeline. So those would be the resources that I would use. But again, for this one, as well as this one, as well as this one, I really do want to hear from you in the comments. So go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how you would approach these questions. And that's pretty much it. And so we are now going to prepare for the next chapter, the next episode, which is the containment to recovery activities for incident response. As usual, you can get the note that I'm using, so the book that I'm actually using that will be available for all of our Hackaholics Anonymous members. You can get that. You can get the practice question slideshow that we just went through, as well as the MITRE attack matrix PDF, the incident response triage template, the timeline creation guide. You will get all of those as downloads exclusive to Hackaholics Anonymous by joining Hackaholics Anonymous. And they're all available in the members area, and links to them will be distributed inside of our members community on the YouTube homepage. And with all of that, Chapter 8 will be complete, and we're going to be ready to go into Chapter 9. So if you're a member of Hackaholics Anonymous already, these things are already available to you, and you can go and get access to them. If you are not, I would urge you to consider joining our lovely membership community. If you found value in this video, then I would encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out on this channel, especially as we complete the CYSA Plus training list, as well as the CompTIA Pentest Plus, AI for Cybersecurity, the SOC Level 1 for 2026, which is the updated version of SOC Level 1 training. All of those things are taking place right now. Offensive pen testing, all of those things. So to get access to them, to not to get access to them, because it will be available to you no matter what. All the content on the channel will forever be free. But to get notified when they come out, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. If you have any comments about what we went through, especially if you are willing to answer the scenario-based questions, then I would encourage you to drop a comment below as well and let me know how you would approach those questions. And if you have any questions about anything else that we talked about, make sure you drop a comment below as well. So to get all of the notifications, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notification. And to get the downloads, to get the book that we use, to get the practice questions, all the exclusive downloads, the scripts that I've developed so far for the previous episodes that we've done, there's a lot of Python scripts that most likely will come out of this, and all of the extra bells and whistles and all the goodies that is available for all the previous courses that we've done. Everything. There's so many things that come as a part of the Hackaholics Anonymous membership. So I urge you to consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. To get access to the CYSA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, PenTest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I will see you in the next video later.